Hi there. Today I'm fascinated to be tasting a wine that I was given while on a trip to China. So this is Xige Estate's N50. It's 2019 vintage and we're from Ningxia. So this is one of China's premium wine producing regions, pretty much in the middle of China, slightly to the north, up heading towards the Mongolian border. So Xige Estate translates roughly means West Dove. It's named after a nearby lake, the West Dove Lake. They're part of the Helan Mountain Wine Region, but their position about an hour's drive south of Yinchuan means that they are actually they have their own sub-region, the Dove Mountain Region, or Qintongxia, as I believe it would be sort of pronounced in Chinese, so my apologies to anybody Chinese listening for mangling their language. The winery here, relatively new, was started in 2017, although they started with a bit of a head start, buying 1,000 hectares of already planted vines that have been planted in about 2000 as part of a project to alleviate rural poverty in this area. The Chinese government see two advantages to viticulture in this area. It's the providing jobs for rural poor year round, and also to stem the encroachment of the Gobi Desert and prevent dust storms by having agriculture going on, and agriculture that doesn't use too much water impact. The winery here, as I say, they bought 1,000 hectares. They then went ahead and since 2017 they've planted another 1,000 hectares, and these are all experimental. They really aren't particularly sure what grape varieties work in the soils and with the climate that they have in this area. So experimenting on quite a large scale. The experiment also involved building a winery, which is a 25,000 square metre capacity, which was designed and built in a year and a half. So things are moving relatively quickly in terms of production here. Also, they're interested in promoting wine tourism, which is quite a big thing for the Helan Mountain region. And as part of their winery there's a small hotel, so if you're ever up that way, might be worth a visit. The region, it's called Helan Mountain because the Helan Mountains protect the region from cold northerly winds coming down from cooler Asia to the north. At the same time, it's also an area that's very continental in terms of its climate, so they have really cold winters, and that makes this quite a labour-intensive area to make wine. I mean, not only because the vines are both harvested and pruned entirely by hand, but also because during the winters it gets so cold that if they're left out and exposed, the vines will die. So the solution is to plant them so that they can be so that the trunks run almost horizontally, so that they can be covered with earth during the winter and then dug up again for the growing season. As climatically, the region is one might say marginal for growing grapes. There's only 200 millimetres of rainfall a year, which is not enough without supplementary irrigation. Fortunately, the Yellow River is a nearby resource and there's plenty of water available. Again, the government sees viticulture as actually quite a low water input means of agriculture. I guess sort of rice paddies, etc., which are traditional for the Chinese, are quite high input in terms of water, and even orchards would require much more water than a vineyard does. The wine is a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and a grape variety called Cabernet Gerneisht. Cabernet Gerneisht is pretty much China's own grape variety. The story goes that in the 1880s, when Chengyu was set up, one of the early wineries in China, one of the first wineries in China, they imported cuttings of vines from Europe, and amongst these was a group labelled Cabernet Gerneisht in German, and that became translated to Cabernet Gerneisht. And it's probable that Gerneisht in German meaning mixed, this was a box of mixed Cabernet cuttings, and could well have included Carmenere or Cabernet Franc, which are the two main contenders for being considered to be Cabernet Gerneisht. There are various arguments go on. These days most authorities assume that the variety was actually Carmenere, although there are other studies that suggest it could be Cabernet Franc. So it's always possible that both varieties exist as Cabernet Gerneisht in different areas of China. And in honesty, DNA fingerprinting hasn't really sorted that out. And of course, if the vine's been in China for 140 years, vines mutate, and if it's been in its own environment, it will actually have become its own sort of separate variety. So this is China's grape variety. Now, my understanding was that this was called 50 because of, in terms of balance, a 50-50 balance of Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Gerneisht. Although subsequently, I must have gotten that wrong, because I've seen other sources suggest that it's actually 95% Cabernet Sauvignon and only 5% Cabernet Gerneisht. So I'm not quite sure what the correct position of that is. The fruit is entirely hand-picked. There's no mechanisation here, despite the fact they have a very large vineyard of sort of 2,000 hectares. All the fruit is sorted by hand on tables. Any poor quality fruit is rejected. Fermentation goes on in stainless steel tanks with temperature control, and they have a selection of tank sizes so that different vineyards plots can be fermented together to enable their own specific characteristics to come out, so that they can subsequently be used in blending. Aging goes on for 12 months in French oak. They use 300 litre oak barrels to give a slightly less oak influence than you would get with barrique. Quite traditional winemaking, as you'd probably see in somewhere like Bordeaux. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? Having swirled it earlier, I have to say there's some staining on the glass where droplets are formed, and there is a good dark colour. It's not particularly deep, I can see through it, but it's a dark ruby with a reddish rim, not particularly purple. Let's have a look at the aromas, shall we, or smell of the aromas perhaps. It's really quite classic. There's a sort of a rich blackcurranty note, and behind that there's a dusty, cedary, becoming sort of rich vanilla, a little bit sort of warm and exotic vanilla spice notes there. So let's taste it. The wine is rich and ripe, and that's not surprising. I mean, this is an area that gets a lot of sunshine and has quite warm summers. There's a rich, fruit-forward sort of black plum, damson, bullace, dark mulberry, all those sort of ripe, juicy fruits. And so also a freshness. There's quite a nice acidities coming through there. The tannins are supple and ripe, not particularly astringent, but they're giving a fair bite. There's a cedary note from the oak. It's a nice clean cedary note. It stands out a little, but actually there's enough fruit surrounding it that it's not standing out harshly in any way. And it's providing a sort of a richness and a ripeness. The finish is juicy. There's a little bit of warmth from the alcohol. The label says that's 14.5%. So not overly alcoholic, not a massive blockbuster, but there is some warmth and richness coming from that. That's putting that more sort of red fruit mulberry note onto the back palate there. the flavours are lasting nicely. And it tends to be the fruit that's coming through more than the structure. The structure has that suppleness that it's allowing the fruit to come out beyond it. So yes, I think that that is actually a really decent wine. Someone has suggested to me that Xige Estate has something like Penfolds in terms of that their production is quite large and they have a high quality range at the top, this being part of that. That would make sense. The style seems to be quite New World, fruit forward and rich, but with a good enough structure that would probably age for 4 or 5 years quite happily. Depending on price, of course, that is a perfectly respectable bottle of red wine that I'm really enjoying. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this interesting. I don't know how easy we'll find it is to get hold of Chinese wine, but I'm sure that over the next few years we will see a lot more of it being produced. So something to look out for, perhaps. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you'll join us again soon, and I hope you'll like and share, follow our channel, and most importantly, do come back soon. Bye now.